Dow closes 567 points higher today after crazy market swings. This is according to CNBC.com. After two huge sell-offs in a row, U.S. stocks were well over the map on Tuesday, today. Investors blame the wild moves on a combination of interest rate fears, computer-driven trading, and the obscure volatility funds that use leverage. I was doing some research into that stuff. That's very interesting. Volatilities, leveraged ETFs, all that stuff. It's very, very confusing. The Dow Jones Industrial Average opened with a big whoosh lower, then rallied all the way back. The Dow closed 567.02 points higher at 24,912.77 points and rose as much as 600.48 points today. At its session low, it was down by 567 points. It traded in a range of 1,167 points. Jeez Louise. Dow DuPont was the best performer on the Dow, rising nearly 6%. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world, in a stock market, in an economy that is beyond reason. We are on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. Also on the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. If you're catching that, you can catch that anywhere podcasts are available. Best way to do it, download the Beyond Reason Radio app on the Google Play or Apple App Store. Do it right now, so it's just there for you. And if you need a voice of reason, if you're having a bad day and you're like, man, I need a voice of reason, well, there you go. You can pull out your smartphone, push the Beyond Reason Radio app, and it's right there for you. Also follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So we're going to talk a lot about the stock market and the economy in this first hour. Later in the hour, about a half an hour, we're going to talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Investment Planning here in Orlando. He's going to talk to us about the stock market and give his take on everything. He's a pretty reasonable voice when it comes to all this. And so we'll talk to him later. And I'm going to give my take as well. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is producing tonight. How are you, Tom?
How do? I am a little miffed, a little perturbed tonight.
Uh-oh. What happened?
Well,
tell Mike here.
Before we get to Wall Street, let me tell you a Main Street story.
Okay.
When I was at Fort Hood, Texas years ago with my bride, we lived off the base.
Uh-huh.
And we had a landlord.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the landlord found out that we had, in the military, gotten a little raise, he raised the rent. How nice. How convenient for him. Well, good. Capitalism at its best. Well, here it's happening all over again. With the tax cut, we're supposed to be seeing a little more extra in our paychecks starting February 1st. What has gone up twice in the past 7, maybe 10 days? The price of gasoline.
Oh, so you think that's related?
We're now at $2.69. That's what I'm seeing for the most. And I just think, it's the old oil companies, gasoline companies, and everybody in between getting their little cut of the tax cut benefits.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah,
possibility. I mean, they are a little worried about inflation. It's one of the.
Sure, they have lots of reasons why.
All right, so there you go. That's Tom Benson's report from Main Street.
A well in Kuwait got shut down, so let's raise the price of gasoline. An oil truck got overturned on Interstate 10 in Louisiana, so let's raise the price. It's just one thing after another. They always have an excuse. It's sort of like the weathermen. They always have an excuse as to what went wrong with their forecasts.
So now we have anyone who works for the oil companies has just turned off the radio, and now we have any weatherman, meteorologists have just turned off the radio. Thanks, Tom. No, I understand what you're saying. I didn't really think about, you talked about raising the rent early,
Uh-huh.
I'm a little worried that probably is going to happen to me next year now because of that. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thanks for that nice thought.
Other than that, I'm doing just dandy. Looking forward to tonight's show.
Yeah, we have a lot to get to, and I want to get into the stock market. Because today we had a gain, but yesterday we had the biggest point loss in history. Not percentage loss, but point loss. And the media was all too giddy to talk about it. I mean, they couldn't wait. And part of it, I mean, they hate Trump, obviously. But Trump kind of walked into it because Trump has been praising the stock market and taking credit for the high stock market since he's been in office. So when you do that, when the stock market goes down, you're going to get criticized for it. You kind of walk into that trap. But all presidents do it, really. I mean, all presidents do it, so it's kind of neither here nor there.
Sure, you expect that. But when the stock market is going through the roof, two news outlets in particular, did they put up big? No, they put up big screen. No, of course not.
Obama's not president anymore, so of course they're not going to do that. But so it's funny. Friday, the stock market went down 666 points. Oh, Satan was involved in the stock market. Did some of that satanic yoga. That's what the stock market was doing on Friday. But there's so many different aspects to what's going on with the stock market. It's funny watching all of the news coverage of it from financial analysts because they're all saying that the economy is great, that there's nothing in the economy that we really should be worried about. This is sort of in its own little bubble in the stock market, and that's why it's happening. Then some are saying that the stock market is crashing because the economy is too good, which is very interesting. But there's really two main reasons that I've seen over and over again of why the stock market did what it did yesterday. You have to kind of connect the dots here. What were two things that happened right before the stock market started tanking? There were two different news stories that came out right before it started tanking. The first one is they swore in a new Fed chairman. Jerome Powell was sworn in as the new Fed chairman after Janet Yellen. That's the first thing that happened right before the stock market started tanking. The second thing that happened right before was the CBO came out with a report that said the government is set to borrow nearly $1 trillion this year. That's an 84% jump from last year. So the CBO came out and they're blaming the tax cuts. And this always happens when tax cuts first get implemented. They don't have as much revenue the first year, and then it goes back up because there's economic growth. Happened during Reagan. Revenues actually started increasing eventually after the tax cuts. As a percentage of GDP, revenue stayed pretty much around the same, even with the tax cuts. So eventually revenue is going to go back up, but you have a huge amount of debt coming this year. Two different things that happen, two different big reports that happen, and the stock market starts to tank. And my initial thought on this, especially the first thing, because the reason why the Jerome Powell thing is important, him becoming the Fed chairman, is because they know he's probably going to raise interest rates. They're afraid of inflation now because of the economic growth, and so they know that Jerome Powell's going to come in and the Fed's going to raise interest rate. When you raise interest rates, it affects credit, borrowing, and all of that stuff in the economy. Not only that, but people leave the stock market and they start to invest in treasury bonds. So now a bunch of people are going to leave the stock market and put their money in treasuries because they'll be able to make more money in treasuries because the interest rate is going up. And my first thought in all of this was, it is stunning to me how much control that institution, the Federal Reserve, has on our economy. When you step back and you look at it, it's kind of scary when you think about it. The Federal Reserve, which is unelected, it's an independent institution. That was the whole point. The only person who is kind of connected to the government is the chairman. That's it. Everyone else is unelected. And yet they have immense power over the economy. And because of what the Fed does, what they did for years under Obama, keeping interest rates artificially low, easy money into the stock market, propping up the economy and basically propping up the stock market with debt. That's what they've been doing with quantitative easing, with having huge balance sheets, with artificially low interest rates. You have this institution of unelected people propping up this economy. And they just have this board that makes a quick decision that they're going to raise interest rates, and it affects our stock market like it did. It affects our economy like it did. Is there no one else that kind of has a problem with this? that maybe that's a lot of power that we're giving to very few people relative to the rest of the economy. You know, I'm not quite the Ron Paul person who believes we should end the Fed, but I do think that it's time to audit the Fed. There have been some conservatives, there have been Rand Paul and others in Congress who have been saying we at least need to audit the Fed. We need to figure out what's going on. Because it just seems like so many of these bubble and bust cycles, and they just seem to be getting bigger and bigger. Has anyone else noticed that? We have these huge bubble and bust cycles that it creates giant bubbles, especially in the stock market, and then all of a sudden you get a huge correction. It used to be you would get some little bubble correction here and there, would kind of flow. Now it's a big up and downs. I think so much of that is because of what the Fed is doing. And so much of it is because of the debt. That was the other thing that happened. We're still increasing our debt. It's going to go up even more because we're not willing to cut spending. And this is going to create even more problems in our economy, which I've been warning about on this show for weeks. This is going to create even more problems in our economy and the stock market. So these are two things you need to look out for. If they're going to raise interest rates because they want to control inflation, we'll see what happens. But there is just way too much power in that institution, in my opinion. And frankly, this is why a lot of people start running to cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies are unregulated by these institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, I mean, there was a time when you didn't have the Federal Reserve where currency was also, you know, traded in the marketplace and wasn't totally controlled by a central institution in the government. I don't know. And of course, our currency is not backed by anything real. It's just backed by a sort of promise by the Federal Reserve.
Promissory notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that creates other problems as well. But it's amazing to me. Now, there's another thing that I found very interesting. This came from thestreet.com. Somebody has a little bit of a theory here. His name is Peter Schiff. He's the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. And actually, Tom, I have audio here of what he said. He has a little bit of a theory also on what's going on with the stock market, but really what's going on with the Federal Reserve. This is what he said.
They were talking about raising interest rates for years before they did it. In fact, I think the only reason they've been raising rates recently is because Trump is president. If Clinton were president, I don't think we would have had any of the last three rate hikes. I think the data-dependent Fed would have looked at all that lousy data and they would have left rates alone. But
so he also said this. He said, I don't know if the Fed has as much love for Trump. He says maybe the Fed would be happy to see a bear market that could be blamed on Trump. You know what he's saying here? He is basically saying that the Federal Reserve is a part of the deep state that's against Trump. I got to tell you, when I first saw this, I was like, this is exhausting. I am so exhausted by this whole narrative of everybody is out to get Trump. Whether it's whatever institution or people in Congress or the media, and now the Federal Reserve is out to get Trump. It's just exhausting. I don't know if I can buy into this, that the Fed's out to get Trump. But that being said, there is something to be said about the fact that you have a small number of people who have vast amounts of power over the economy. And you know what? A lot of times those people are political. So they have the power to make political decisions. I don't know if they are now, but that's why it's always problematic to give small amounts of people centralized power. It's not good. That being said, I'm just exhausted. I don't know. I'm just exhausted by the narrative of everything it's happening because
is a conspiracy of some sort.
Yeah. I'm just getting a little tired of it. I just am. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. Have some audio I'm going to play in the next segment that I was going to play on Thursday's show last week, and we ended up running out of time, and now I wish I would have played it, and I'll tell you why in a sec. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
407-916-5400. If you want to call the show, 407-916-5400. You can also text to 23680, where standard message and data rates apply, 23680. We're on Facebook Live as well. Just like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page they're on Facebook, and you can follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. So I have some audio here that I actually was going to play on the show last Thursday on my show. And I'm very upset that I did not play it. This is Alan Greenspan, former Fed chairman in the 90s. He's actually a libertarian. I read his book years ago. It was pretty good. He's married to Andrea Mitchell, who's not a libertarian. She worked for NBC News. I have no idea how that relationship works. It's very interesting. I don't know. But
and I want to know who pays the bills in the household. Who writes the checks?
We know who does. Alan Greenspan was on Bloomberg TV last week. This is him last Wednesday predicting basically that the stock market is in a bubble and there's going to be a correction. This is from last Wednesday before all of this happened. This is what he said.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I think there are two bubbles. We have a stock market bubble and we have a bond market bubble. I think in the end of the day, the bond market bubble will eventually be the critical issue. But for the short term, it's not too bad. But we're working obviously towards a major increase in long-term interest rates. And that has a very important impact, as you know, on the whole structure of the economy.
So he basically predicted that because of them wanting to increase long-term interest rates, that there would be that it would affect the economy, it would affect the stock market, and we're basically in a bubble because it's overvalued. The stock market is overvalued. There's no way it can just keep going up and up and up and up as crazy as it is without some kind of correction, especially if inflation comes in because of the tax cuts and the economy growing. And, the next day it went down, and then the day after that it went down even more, and then the day after that it went down even more. So I don't know, maybe he started this. Maybe it's his fault he predicted this. I don't know, but I thought that was amazing.
It could be reaction to what he said. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm one person. I don't know, but I think he saw this coming, and everyone had to. Anyone who's honest with themselves had to have seen it coming a little bit, because there's just no way the stock market can go up like that as fast as it was without some kind of correction. It's impossible. And unfortunately, the way the economy works now, the way the stock market works now, is every time there's a correction, there's also a panic. So you get mass sell-offs because a little bit of a correction creates a big panic, and it keeps going down. That's why today it went up even more, because the panic kind of subsided and people are like, okay, I can start buying again. I think that happened. Now, what he warns about next here in this next comment, in the same interview, is really what we all should be concerned about, which I've been talking about on this show for weeks now. Here's what he said.
What's behind the bubble? Well, the fact, essentially, that we're beginning to run an ever larger government deficit. Remember that we're talking now about deficits going to $1 trillion, but debt has been rising very significantly. And we are, in fact, if you wanted to take the Congressional Budget Office figures at face value, we're going to run through the peaks of where we were during World War II on the ratio of federal debt to GDP, which is extraordinarily high, and I think we're just not paying enough attention to that.
So, did you hear what he said there? We are running into debt and deficit ratios to World War II levels, and we're not at war. Unfortunately, a lot of this economy is propped up by government debt. It cannot last forever. It's going to collapse under its own weight, and it's going to be a problem. I'm telling you, it's going to be a problem. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. We're going to talk to Joel Garris of Nelson Investment Planning on the stock market. That's coming up next here on Beyond Reason Radio.
You know what's beyond reason? Yaffee is now on YouTube. Go to YouTube now and just search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. If you have any comments, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680, which standard message and data rates apply. We've been talking about the stock market because it's been, well, beyond reason this week. And so I wanted to get some expert advice on it. You got my take on it from the beginning. There was a couple things that happened that I think triggered some of this. One was the new Fed chairman sworn in. They think he's going to raise interest rates. Two, CBO report that the deficit this year is going to be very high, which is going to increase the debt, and that's going to be a problem. Outside of that, it was a correction. But I wanted to get a real expert on, so we're going to talk right now with Joel Garris of Nelson Investment Planning, who is also, yes, and he also does a show Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. right here on WFLA called Dollars and Cents, where he talks about this very stuff. So let's get him on. Hey, Joel, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? Good evening.
I'm doing pretty good. So stock market was actually up today over 500. It was like 567 points. What's up with that?
That's right. Well, as we see, like a day like yesterday, which is, of course, the what everybody's talking about, when you see the market sort of really accelerate, and if you watched kind of what was going on yesterday, you saw in the last 2 or 3 hours, it started to really kind of accelerate in terms of the decline. What you'll typically see then sort of the next day is people taking a second look and saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't have sold as quickly as I did. And so often what happens after really bad days like Monday is you'll see a positive day come in there.
Yeah, I actually said that a little bit, that it seems like what happens is you start to get somewhat of a correction, but for some reason in today's world in the market, you have this panic that kind of feeds on itself. So once the correction starts, there's sort of a panic, and then the next day they're like, oh, maybe it wasn't as bad, and then they buy into it again.
Well, I think one of the biggest changes that's happened just in terms of how people invest money is you have a tremendous amount more money in index funds and ETFs that really sort of blindly kind of follow those indexes. So if there's big movement in those indexes and people start to sell, then that's what's really, I think, causing a lot of the acceleration on Mondays. You had a lot of what people own these days is more this passive investment that simply follow the market, and I think that's what can lead to some outsized volatility like we saw on Monday.
What do you mean by passive investment? Is it just because it's not in one specific thing? What do you mean by that?
No, a passive investment is generally something that's going to own what the market owns. So if you look at the S&P 500, that's 500 companies, and so an index fund that tracks that S&P 500 index is passive in nature, in that it's not making a call as to whether company A in the index is better than company B. If both company A and company B are in the index, then that fund, that passive fund, is going to own both of those companies so long as they're in the index. So there's no real rationale behind the investment strategy other than it's simply tracking an index that is widely followed, like the S&P 500.
Gotcha. And from what I understand, the reason why people invest in these marginal funds or these passive funds is you get sort of a quicker return on your investment, even though when the market goes down, that means you lose a lot more quicker. Is that right?
Well, it's really about expenses. I mean, if a fund is set up to just follow the index, then it's going to have lower expenses as opposed to the other sort of universe of funds and ETFs that are more actively managed. So if particularly an active fund, they're making a decision as to whether it makes sense to buy Amazon, for example. A passive fund is just going to own Amazon by virtue of Amazon being part of the index itself. So it sort of comes down to expenses, which in the financial industry, a lot of investors are focused on that. And obviously that's a very important part of that. But in contrast to sort of traditional investing with an active management approach, on an index, generally you're going to be doing it yourself, or you're calling a 1-800 number, and oftentimes the other person on the other end of the line isn't someone that's been in the business for a while and can help provide perspective and to talk to folks reasonably about what their long-term goals are. Most of the time it's not much of a conversation if you're kind of doing it on your own accord using an index fund.
Interesting. All right, I'm learning something new here. I think this is confusing to a lot of people. Well, let me just get your prediction. Does the downfall continue, or was it just that couple days thing, and now we're going to start riding the wave up again?
Well, I think as human beings, we're often there's a psychological phenomenon that's called recency. And it's that phenomenon where, as human beings, we only think of the thing that has happened most frequently or most recently, that we think is somehow going to be the road going forward. And last year was a historical year for the markets in that there really wasn't any volatility at all. In fact, just a week ago, the markets had gone on the longest stretch without even so much as a 3% decline, which is very rare. When you look at the history of the market, you'll find on average about 3 times during any calendar year, you'll see declines of between 5 and 10%. So these types of declines are actually quite normal. It's just that we really haven't seen any type of volatility for really since the election. So it's been a long period of time where there really hasn't been any volatility. And I think folks kind of got a little complacent because it hadn't happened for a while, and they sort of forgot that it's a normal part of being an investor.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, I think you're right that there is sort of these natural up and downs. And when you look at the big picture, this is sort of correcting for a year that was up and up and up. But I think people are kind of getting annoyed. What's with the dramatic changes, I guess? Why do we have these boom cycles that it goes up and up and up and up and for a year, and then you get a giant crash, it seems like, down to make the correction? Shouldn't it be more of a natural flow?
Well, I wish it were that way. I think if it were, a lot more people would be investors and own stocks than actually do. But the stock market has a history of having an inherent level of volatility. That certainly has a nice upward trend over the years, but if you pick periods of time, it's enough to unsettle anybody's stomach. And I think that's why a lot of investors struggle to achieve rates of return that are close to what the market has done over time. The studies on this are really kind of interesting. You look at what the market has generated in terms of return over the course of the past 20 years, and it's about 9% on average. And then you look at what the average equity investor has generated during that same period of time, and you know what? It's only like 3%. And that is because there is some inherent level of volatility in the market that ultimately causes people's emotions to get in the middle of those decisions, and oftentimes people will react on a yesterday and miss out on it today.
I've heard advice from some people. I'm not sure if it was you, but and you're kind of alluding to it there, that really what you should do when it comes to the market is look at the long term. And a lot of times it's just letting it sit there, or slowly adding a little bit to a stock or a fund and letting it sit there instead of emotionally reacting to every move every day. That if you kind of just let it do its thing over a couple of decades, you're going to inevitably make a good amount of money on it.
as with anything in life, if you're consistent at doing it, then you're going to achieve success. It's the inconsistencies, no matter what we do in life. If we start being inconsistent, then we're not going to get the as good a results. You know, it is interesting. You know, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I think with the fractioning of the media, you know, you have the cable networks. You always have the traditional networks. Then you have the cable networks, and then of course the internet and the social media, and everybody's trying to kind of be heard. And I think what's happened along the way is that the stock market has turned into almost like a sport or a sporting event where there's a score at
like
the end
politics.
of every day. Yeah, I mean, and the problem is that when people are investing, they're investing for the rest of their lives. I mean, they're not investing for today or tomorrow. It's for the rest of their lives, because that's how long they're going to need their money for. So I think with the fracturing of media that's happened over the past 20 years, it's really turned investing into much more of a sport almost. And I think that has really been a big distraction from people achieving good investment results over time.
So what is your advice for a regular Joe Schmo like me or someone listening when it comes to what the stock market is doing right now? I mean, should we react, or what should we do?
Look, volatility is a normal part of the market. Last year certainly was a good year, but we forget that the couple of years before that really weren't really much of returns in the market. So a lot of the returns last year were sort of making up for the prior couple of years where you didn't have much in terms of market performance. So from a volatility perspective, it is a normal part of the market, and so we're encouraging folks to obviously look at their overall allocation and make sure that there's a good mix of stocks and bonds and some balance in there, and make sure that it's sort of on track for doing what it needs to do for the rest of your life. And that's probably the most important thing that folks can do now is look at that overall allocation and make sure it's still consistent with their goals. And at the end of the day, there's a little bit of a sale going on in the market. So if you've got some extra money, perhaps you think about adding it in or adding it in over time. We're always big fans of the concept known as dollar cost averaging, which basically is, you know, kind of putting in the same amount of money on a regular and systematic basis. And that really helps to smooth out the volatility in the market, because some months when the market's up, you buy a little bit less, and then the next month when the market's down, you buy a little bit more.
Interesting. All right. We've been talking with Joel Garris of Nelson Investment Planning Services, and my last question to you is, do you think the Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates, and will that have an effect on the economy?
You know, certainly the Federal Reserve is going to be raising interest rates going forward. I think as we start to see stronger economic data, the Federal Reserve is going to try and use those interest rates to make sure that things don't get overheated. I like to describe the economy almost as Goldilocks and that porridge. And you don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. You want it to be just right. And so the Federal Reserve really tries to use interest rates to make sure that the economy isn't getting overheated. And certainly some of the economic data that has come out suggests that the economy is on a pretty solid footing. So
now, why don't you want it? I was just going to ask, why don't you want it to get overheated? Is that because of inflation?
Well, it's inflation. If it gets overheated, then usually that means you wind up having a pretty rough contraction after that. You don't want anything to get too overheated, because the aftermath is much more painful. So that's how they're using interest rates. But here's a key distinction I think a lot of folks miss is the Federal Reserve is controlling interest rates, but in terms of the interest that the Treasury pays on its bonds, that's really much more of a function of the bond market. And the good news is that there is still a high demand for United States Treasuries in the world out there today, because we have better interest rates hence a better investment than a lot of other countries out there these days.
Even with them historically low.
Even with them historically low, most other nations are even lower, and some have even had to go negative. Although that situation has improved a little bit, but many of them had to go negative as recently as 6 to 12 months ago.
Interesting. All right, we've been talking with Joel Garris of Nelson Investment Planning. You can also catch out his show, Dollars and Cents, Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. And Joel, thank you so much for educating us today, and we'll talk to you again.
Pleasure to be here. Love the show. Have a good evening.
All right, thanks, man. And I'm going to end this hour. We have a lot more to talk about on the show. It was a great take. I learned a lot. We're going to end this hour with something so beyond reason, you just can't make it up. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, I am back on the show Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We got Tom Benson producing. If you have any comments, you can call 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. We're on till 10 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. We're also on the podcast after the show. You can get on the Beyond Reason Radio app. We're on Facebook Live as well. We have one more hour to go. We're on until 10 p.m. In the next hour, I have a lot more stuff I have to get to. We have a potential of a government shutdown, another one. You know, feels like just yesterday we were going through this, our good old government shutdown. So we might be going through that again. So yay, that's exciting. And Trump made some comments on that, which of course were controversial. Of course, if it came out of Trump's mouth, they was. So we'll talk about that. We also have to talk about Memogate. I haven't been on since they released the memo, so I haven't had too much of a chance to give my take on it. So we will do that as well. You'll want the voice of reason take on the memo thing. And, we'll get to that. But I had to end this hour with something so beyond reason. You just can't make it up.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
Yes, it really is. So there's an op-ed contributor onto the New York Times, an op-ed in the New York Times by Emily Lynn. And the op-ed is it's actually a video that she put out on there and then put the lyrics out. She is apparently new to the dating scene, to being single. I guess I don't know if she used to be married or what, but now she's single. And she's very, very distraught about being single in today's world. And she put out a song about it. And I just have to say, this song makes me very distraught about being single in today's world, because there's a chance I could end up on a date with a girl this psycho. This is her song. It is Beyond Reason. Here it is.
Hey.
Hey.
Have you been reading the news?
Yeesh, maybe let's order some booze.
Well, I'd really like to hear about your views.
This movement's gotten just a touch out of hand.
Well, change only happens after taking a stand.
Hey,
Talking me
would
too.
you ever want to come see my band?
What did you say? That's not okay. I'm feeling triggered and you've ruined my day. Hey, ho, ho. Donald Trump's gotta go. Join the resistance, you tone-deaf Joe Schmo. Singing, ooh, this guy's garbage. Ooh, this guy's clearly a foe. You see, we're victims of systemic oppression.
Yeah, but thank God we're in a time of progression.
Your deflection is a microaggression.
Oh, I didn't mean it. Please don't be mad.
Aw, buddy, do you have more to add?
Hashtag not all men are that bad.
What did you say? That's not okay. I'm feeling triggered in every which way. Doesn't that plant look great? Go ahead, Ronan Farrow to up this date, singing, ooh, men are toxic, ooh, why on earth am I straight?
Oh, boy.
Yeah. This
willing
is what I have to put up with in today's world, Tom Benson.
I'd be
being
willing
single.
to bet she's a cord cutter, and she has too much time on her hands now because she no longer watches television.
This is an op-ed in the New York Times. She got triggered. She writes a song because she goes on a date and is triggered because the guy says not all men are bad. Oh, that's not okay. I'm triggered.
You know,
Me too.
I always thought op-eds were supposed to be opposite views of the editorial page.
I don't know.
But in the New York Times and the Washington Post, it just seems to be an echo chamber.
I don't know. At the beginning of her song, by the way, which I didn't have here, she says, all I want is a man who's not committed a crime. But that feels very unlikely in this landscape we're in, much to my chagrin. All I want is a man who's not committed a crime? Where in the world are you spending your time? Hey, look at that. I can rhyme too. Look at, I should sing a song. Oh, boy. So in that little bit I played there, she was triggered because a guy says, hey, is not into politics, and hey, says, hey, you want to join, you want to watch my band? She was triggered because the guy says we're in a time of progression and not all men are bad. And then she says, why am I straight? All men are toxic. And this is going well in the dating world for her? What? This is what I have to deal with in the dating world, Tom Benson.
Well, I think she's not dating well, and that's why another reason why she has time on her hands.
to write dumb songs like this.
It's probably written on a Saturday night.
Oh, and of course, Trump's got to go join the resistance. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is just what I would love on a date. Oh, joy. Oh, she's bringing out her guitar, singing about the resistance.
Well, I don't know for sure, but I've heard that you get Tinder recommendations now or qualifications. Must not be a Trump supporter. For people who are looking for a date on Tinder.
Oh yeah, well I'm on Bumble, which is a little like Tinder, but the girl has to contact you first.
Okay.
And there are girls that say they'll say straight up on the app. They say, if you're a Trump supporter, I don't want to talk.
There
to
you go. Yeah.
It's what really bothers me about the dating scene and all these dating websites.
Mm-hmm. We
only have a minute here, but a lot of these girls, all they say, they talk about what they want to do for fun. They're like, oh, I go to the beach. I love to travel. I love my dog. Nobody ever talks about what they're passionate about. Nobody ever talks about what they want to actually build or create in their lives. They just want to talk about how much they drink wine and go on adventures and travel. I'm like, can we get a little deeper than this, please?
Your generation, what can I say?
How about what you want to create? How about what you want to build for the future of our planet, our world, our country? I probably just triggered someone in saying that. I guess what I said was a microaggression. I don't know. We have one more hour to go of microaggressions here on Beyond Reason Radio. And I hope you stick with me. A lot more to get to. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. One more hour to go. We'll be right back.
I look inside of myself.
The latest from Politico just a couple hours ago, the House passed a stopgap bill Tuesday to prevent another government shutdown as a broader budget deal appeared increasingly within reach on Capitol Hill. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer met privately on Tuesday to discuss lifting stiff spending caps as part of the short-term funding package, according to sources in both parties briefed on the talks. Oh, well, that's great. So they both agreed on increasing spending. Lovely. That's just lovely. There we go. $1 trillion deficit next year, and we're going to increase spending. Congressional leaders believe they are close to clinching a budget deal to significantly boost defense and domestic spending and end the cycle of temporary funding measures. The bill passed by the House 245 to 182 would boost Pentagon spending over the next 8 months while funding non-defense programs at current levels and then only until March 23rd. The defense-only approach was an easy one in the House, but it's pretty much not a sure thing in the Senate. They're going to rewrite it, yada, yada, yada. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. And, of course, we have Mr. Tom Benson, who is with us as well.
How do? Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I mean,
the shutdown is what? It's supposed to be Friday?
Yeah.
This Friday already?
I think.
Jeez.
So there you go. You excited about that? Another weekend of no government?
I'd just like to see the legislators do some work in the next few days. I mean, that in itself is novel.
True. I mean, but you're prepared, right? You know, we might have to hunker down if the government shutdowns again. You got your doomsday shelter ready and prepped?
Yep. I got the mattress in the spare bathroom, and we're ready to hunker down and cover up if we need to.
All right, good. Just check it. I would have been worried about you. So, yes, there is the potential of another government shutdown, I guess, and there's some things I definitely want to get into with this. President Trump actually commented on this already about a potential government shutdown, and a lot of Republicans didn't like what he said, but here it is. This is what he said.
Frankly, I'll go a step further. If we don't change the legislation, if we don't get rid of these loopholes where killers are allowed to come into our country and continue to kill gang members, and we're just talking about MS-13, there are many gang members that we don't even mention. If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country. I'd love to see a shutdown if we don't get this stuff taken care of.
So Trump is now saying he would love a shutdown if we don't get this taken care of. The reason why Trump is doing this is because the last shutdown made the Democrats look bad. So he's thinking, hey, if the Democrats are going to shut down the government once again over immigration, fine, do it.
Yeah.
Make me look even better because the American people are not with you when it comes to immigration. So it looks like we might do a shutdown again, and it looks like it's probably because of immigration. Which is just, I don't know. I really don't think there is going to be a shutdown because the Democrats don't want another shutdown because it made them look bad. They don't want to go through this again. There's no doubt. But what's funny about all this is there's an easy solution. Trump's plan over immigration and DACA is a pretty reasonable compromise when it comes to immigration.
And higher totals than originally expected.
Higher totals than what Obama proposed.
Yeah.
So Trump has already said, this week that the White House said there are no plans to deport any of the Dreamers. So that's not going to happen. Trump now has a plan to give over 1 million people amnesty, basically, and a path to citizenship in like 10 to 12 years. It's what Democrats want. All Trump is asking for in return is funding for the wall. That's it. And not even complete funding for the wall, just some other funding for the wall. Why the Democrats will not jump on board with this? I don't know. In fact, we know why. But the fact is, Trump's plan almost goes further than Rubio's plan, the Gang of Eight plan that the Republicans hated and called Rubio basically a traitor to the party.
The Dems need voters this year, not 10 to 12 years from now.
Yes. That is exactly right. You were exactly right on that. The Democrats, and part of it's Trump's fault, because Trump, by admitting he's not going to deport the Dreamers, they basically meant we're not going to do it. By doing that, the Democrats know, okay, well, they're not going to do it, so we can let the Dreamers wait until we win the House and the Senate back, and then we'll pass something on DACA. They know they can wait.
So the Dreamers are Democratic pawns.
Yeah, they are. It's funny because the Democrats are saying Trump's the one holding them hostage. Not really. Not really. All Trump wants is border security. That if you're going to give amnesty to 1 million illegal immigrants, that you need to have border security so we don't go into this mess in a few years. You know, we don't have to do this again. That's it. It's a pretty reasonable response. It's the Democrats that are not being reasonable here because they cannot and will not ever support any kind of new border security measures, or they will definitely not support the wall. They're not going to. And Trump was even reasonable on parts of the wall before. I don't even think, a lot of people say the wall is impossible. We can never get the wall built. There's so much of the border that is just, you can't, it has mountains or rivers, and you can't put a wall there. Trust me, they might be right on some of that, but there's a lot of the border that already has a fence. We've seen it. It already has a fence. You just put a wall there on the parts that you can put into it. Trump supporters will be okay with that, and Trump will be okay with that. Even if you don't get it in the whole border, if you get it in the parts of the border that you can and have a decent wall and border security there, they're going to be happy with that.
A lot better than it is now, that's for sure.
Yeah. But the Democrats know that they know they don't have to give in to it. They know because Trump has already said he's not going to deport the Dreamers. So here we are. But this whole idea that this is all Republicans' fault, this is all Trump's fault, it's ridiculous. Trump has a pretty reasonable proposal. Merit-based immigration, which is just common sense, and some border security, and he gives you more than what you want. Now, Nancy Pelosi got into this whole government shutdown thing. She tweeted this out. She said, I can't do a Nancy Pelosi voice. I just can't. I have no idea how you would even possibly do that. I don't have enough Botox in my face to be able to mimic that. Let's be very clear, she says. The reason Congress is facing another stopgap spending bill is because of House GOP and the Senate GOP incompetence. They must stop governing from manufactured crisis to crisis and work with Dems to pass the many urgent priorities of the American people. #do your job. So it's all the Republicans' fault, right? That's it. The Democrats are over here and they want to fund the government. They're all for it, right? And it's just those Republicans who just can't do anything right. Now, I'll agree with her that there's a lot of Republicans in Congress that don't do a lot of things right. They certainly aren't wanting to take care of the debt. But this whole naivete that it's just the Republicans' fault, that the Democrats are angels, and it's just the House and Senate Republicans that are doing this, it's completely absurd.
And she's fooling no one.
Well, you know why it's absurd? Because the main reason that they haven't been able to pass funding in funding the government is because the Democrats have been filibustering in the Senate. That's why. That's the main reason why. This would pass just fine, but the Democrats, under Chuck Schumer, under his leadership, are filibustering any appropriations that have come forth. That's why. The Democrats are then the ones who are stopping this from happening, not the Republicans. In fact, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, he was on Fox and Friends. This was right when so it was a couple weeks ago. This is right when the last government shutdown was happening. He actually made some points on this of why this keeps happening, these continuing resolutions, these government shutdowns, and it doesn't sound anything like what Nancy Pelosi has been saying. This is what he said 2 weeks ago on Fox and Friends. Ready?
Here he goes.
Okay, here he is.
Yeah, look, ask anybody in the House and they will complain to you about filibusters. We're a majoritarian body. We get 50 plus 1% and we pass legislation. We obviously that's how we got the tax bill done, because we use this tool called reconciliation, which blocks filibusters. And so, yeah, we've got hundreds of bills sitting in the Senate that haven't been passed because Chuck Schumer has been using the filibuster. Just so you know, the House, we passed every single appropriation bill last September. So all this talk about having multiple continuing resolutions, the House did its job, passed our spending bills last September, and Chuck Schumer's been filibustering those bills as well.
And you know the country's hurting every time you do a CR because we can't budget, especially the military. True. And you know dollars and cents as well as anyone.
And the House passed the military funding bill for an entire year twice already, and Chuck Schumer's been filibustering that as well.
So the House has already passed these appropriation bills. They passed them last year. They passed military funding appropriation bills. And somehow it's the House GOP's fault that we were at government shutdowns and the incompetence. That's what Nancy Pelosi says. No, Paul Ryan says it right there, and he's exactly right. The main reason this is happening is because the Democrats are filibustering in the Senate. Now, I'm not saying the Republican Party in the Senate and the House are doing what I want them to do. No, they're creating many, many problems, especially when it deals with the debt. But this whole idea that, the Democrats are angels here and it's just incompetence with the GOP and they're the ones creating these crises, it's insulting to my intelligence here, Nancy Pelosi. 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. So we got Memogate to talk about. I want to get into my take on the release of the FISA FBI memo by Chairman David Nunes in the House. I feel like most people are not right about this. If you've heard me talk about this whole issue on the show before, you know I've been pretty frustrated about the issue because there's still a lot we don't know. And even with the release of this 4-page memo, the memo's only 4 pages long, there's still a lot we really don't know. So I want to get into that and some criticism. I look on social media with stuff and different takes on this, and I want to get into things I've seen and my reaction to it as well. All surrounding Russia and FISA and the memo, and you'll want a voice of reason on it all, so we'll get to that and much more. I will end the show with things that made Yaffee laughy. By the way, the best part of the show, according to opinion polls that I'm just making up in my head. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Yes, welcome back to the show. Memogate. Yes, Memogate. We are still full-fledged into Memogate. The House released, under Trump's final approval, released the memo, the FISA memo, the FBI memo, the memo from Chairman David Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee on basically the abuses of the FBI, the FISA court, and basically spying into the Trump campaign, which they believe for nefarious reasons. A lot of people came out and said this memo is a bombshell. It proves that there was bias in the FBI against Trump, or bias from the deep state against Trump. The Democrats and the left and progressives came out and said the memo was a nothing burger. It was a dud. It was full of lies, whatever. Here is my take on the memo. It was only 4 pages long. Here's my take basically on it. There are some problems with it for Democrats, and there's some problems with it for Republicans. So let's start with the Democrats here. One, the Democrats for a week were saying that releasing the memo, and the FBI, frankly, was saying this too. Both of them were saying for a week that releasing this memo would compromise national security. There's nothing in the memo that compromises national security. It's absolutely absurd. Most of what was in the memo was actually already leaked to the press and had already been speculated in the press for weeks before that. There is nothing in there. And I so know some people are trying to argue with me that there is. Whatever. There's nothing in there that compromises national security. So that's a problem for the Democrats because it made them seem like why would they lie about that? The FBI, what are they trying to hide? What are the Democrats trying to hide? What are the Republicans, or what is the FBI trying to hide? The other thing that the memo alleges that the main reason they started surveillance on Carter Page after he was in the Trump administration was because of the Steele dossier. Now, the other thing the memo says is the main reason that's a problem is because Christopher Steele, author of the dossier, had an anti-Trump bias. He had statements specifically saying he didn't want Trump to win. That's a big problem. You can't have a FISA application based only on a memo from such a biased source. You need more information than that. Otherwise, that just shows there's bias. I'm sorry. Any reasonable person could see that. So that's a problem for the Democrats as well. Here's the problem for Republicans. Another thing the memo, and David French from the National Review was the first to point this out, and he's right. Another thing from the memo that's a problem for the Republicans is basically it says in the memo that the investigation into Russian ties with people in the Trump administration did not start with the Steele dossier. It actually started with Papadopoulos. So there was evidence that Papadopoulos was talking with the Russians. The FBI got that evidence, And that's what started a lot of this counterintelligence investigation. That it was not started with the Steele dossier. It was started with Papadopoulos. That pokes a hole in a lot of what the Republicans were saying. The Republicans were saying this is all started because of a phony dossier. It turns out that's not true. The other thing is Carter Page, even though they say this memo was a big reason why the FISA court looked into him, Carter Page had been on the FBI's radar since 2013. They had been looking into him since 2013. He had been a problem for them since 2013. So there could be a lot of other evidence to show that there was a reason to look into Carter Page. There was a reason to look into Papadopoulos. That being said, the Democrats, it's hard for none of this really connects to Trump yet, because Papadopoulos and Carter Page were very minor players in the Trump administration. And basically, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Trump knew nothing about any of this really that was going on. Really. But the main point here is there's still a lot we don't know. If the Republicans really want to prove that there is some sort of deep state conspiracy from the FBI against Trump, all they have to do is get Trump to declassify the FISA application. If Trump declassifies the FISA application and it proves without a doubt that the main reason they started all this was because of the Steele dossier, and if it proves that the FBI knew about Christopher Steele's bias against Trump and still approved it, that would create a lot of problems with this investigation, and it basically would make the investigation and this whole Russia-Trump collusion thing look bad. But there's still a lot we don't know. But any reasonable person can say, look, this investigation started with Papadopoulos. It did not start with the dossier. So that creates a lot of problems for everyone merely focusing on the dossier. Now, you also have Senators Chuck Grassley and Lindsey Graham who come up with their own letter today. They actually have like their own memo that basically says that Christopher Steele broke the law on a lot of stuff he was doing because he was receiving info from the Clinton campaign, possibly from the Obama administration, and he was receiving info from the Russians, who the Russians were giving him misinformation, and all of this was, and didn't disclose that to the FBI. And because he didn't disclose that to the FBI, that could show he didn't give them all the information, and that makes Steele look like problematic. And he had a bias against Trump. So even if the FBI didn't have a bias against Trump, it's Christopher Steele we know did. So that puts the dossier, that makes the dossier very questionable. I have more comments on this, but I want to take a call here. Let's go to Willie in Orlando. Willie, what's your take on all this?
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
Pretty good. What's up, man?
Good. Hey, you know, I'm an old redneck, and I'm reasonably intelligent. I understand politics. Actually, civics was my favorite class growing up, and I remember Watergate and following that. That was complicated. This coming up now is complicated, but what really gets a burr under my butt is it was almost like a soap opera leading up to it. Devin Nunes came up, this is terrible, it's disgusting.
Yep.
And the lead up from Adam Schiff, I mean, it was they built it up, and then all of a sudden it really came out. And I understand it. I know you understand it, but there's a lot of us Trump backers, and a lot of people that are just rednecks and just common people, blue collar people that really don't. They could try to read it and not ever understand it. We were waiting for a video of something, We were waiting on proof where we get to see it. There it is.
Okay, so do you want?
You know where I'm coming from?
So do you have a way to make them understand it, or do you think they just?
I don't
care?
know. It's just it was like, I want to say it was a whole big build up for nothing. I mean, I understand it, and I see the problem. I see that we're right, but to convince the rest of America, even the left wing people, they can't understand it.
Right.
They're going by the talking points from MSNBC and CNN, just like
that's so true. And then, you hit the nail on the head, Willie, and I thank you for your call. There's no smoking gun, really, in this memo. I mean, Fox News has up right now, smoking gun memo. I think they're talking about the Graham memo, but there was still not really a smoking gun yet. But he brought up the point that it's just, I still think, my gut tells me all of this is partisan politics. All of this is partisan politics. You have people that they watch MSNBC and then they listen to them and then they've come up with their own conclusions. You have people that watch Fox News and listen to Hannity and they've come up with their own conclusions. And really, we don't have all the information yet because we don't have the full testimony from McCabe. We don't have the FISA application. So until we have a couple of these things, there's no way to really know. We don't know everything about what went on in the process here. We just don't. We don't even know really where Mueller is going with the investigation. He could be going down a road that nobody has thought about yet. People are saying he's going obstruction of justice. He's moved past collusion. We don't even know. We have no idea. We all of this is speculation. But there is a bigger picture here when it comes to this whole memo, when it comes to this whole FISA application, when it comes to what the FBI was doing. A bigger picture here that really does concern me about all of this, and I'm going to get to that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
So I want to get into the big picture when it comes to everything about the memo, everything about Christopher Steele, everything about the FISA application from the FBI to look into Carter Page and the Trump administration. Because a lot of times we're not looking at the big picture. Everything is partisan, okay? You have one side saying the FBI really didn't want Trump to win. They were looking in the DOJ. They just wanted everything to be against Trump for political reasons. You have the Democrats saying Trump's basically a traitor. He colluded with the Russians to win the election, and this is a problem. And now is participating in obstruction of justice. Here's the thing. Let's say that the Democrats are right, and that everything the FBI did was, for good intentions or whatever. They really thought that, everything they were doing was for the best root of the country. To me, though, it was still too easy to get these warrants to spy on a political campaign. It just seems like this was way too easy. Whatever the motivation is behind it, it seems like it was too easy. Because let's say, there was no motivation. It seems like the infrastructure is there in the future. And I think there was some motivation here today, but let's say there wasn't. It seems like the infrastructure is in place now that if a future DOJ wanted to look into an opposing campaign, they could do it pretty easily. Because all they have to do is come up with some dossier that's funded by the opposition that has a lot of stuff in it, go to the FISA court. Nobody else even knows this is happening because this is all done in secret. And now they have the legal wherewithal to spy into another campaign. My Democrat liberal friends out there who are listening, imagine if Trump got some kind of big dossier on, let's say he runs against Elizabeth Warren in 2020. Let's say that some opposition firm hires someone to get a whole bunch of dirt on Elizabeth Warren. And Trump sees this, and the DOJ and the FBI under Trump say, oh, man, well, this is very serious stuff. They proved that Elizabeth Warren was talking to Iran or something about something. Who knows? And they get all this information. They have this dossier, and Trump goes and says, oh, well, we have to look into the Elizabeth Warren campaign. Are you telling me that the Democrats would not, if they found out about that, they would not be outraged and they would not be assuming that Trump did that for political reasons, that the FBI and the DOJ under Trump were not doing that for political reasons? But yet now the opposite's reversed and the Democrats say, oh, well, no, we just need to trust the FBI. This is what I've been hearing. Just let the FBI do their job. We just need to trust them. We're talking about taking down a president of the United States. I need more than just trust the leaders at the FBI. I'm sorry. I need more than that when you're talking about taking down the president. I do trust the FBI for the most part. But I don't want to hear, well, just trust them. They know what they're doing. Good job. We don't need to know all this. We're talking about taking down a duly elected president. I want all the information out there in front of me to look at before we do that. I think it's a reasonable request, and I think that's what the American people want as well. I don't want to just take down a president and say, well, the FBI, we trust them, so yeah, they must be right, we'll do it. No. We need to make sure that if we ever impeach a president, it's done for the right reasons. But, of course, that's not going to happen. This is all political. Now, another person who was making this point, who has been my voice of reason a lot on this, is Alan Dershowitz. He was on Fox earlier this week talking about the memo, and he brought up the point as well that the real issue here isn't even the political back and forth. It's the fact that there's a problem with this whole FISA application process, which Rand Paul's been saying for a while, and a lot of conservative libertarians in Congress have been saying for a while, that even if the intentions were good now, all it takes is that one person to be able to use this for bad intentions, and it's way too easy for corruption in all of this, to spy on other campaigns. And I think he makes an excellent point, and this is what he said.
That the FBI exaggerates the national security threats when they refuse to declassify memos that might embarrass them, and that has to stop. The public has the right to see material unless the national security is endangered. And we heard the phoniest arguments recently to try to stop this memo from coming out. Now we see the memo, and there's absolutely nothing in it that in any way affects national security. That's number one. Number two, we have to worry generally about the FBI when they're getting FISA requests and warrants, that they don't make full disclosure, that because they have the right to get ex parte warrants without the other side being involved, they have a special obligation to make sure that they disclose everything, even the negative aspects of it. And we know one thing for sure, they did not disclose that this dossier came from a biased source. They should have disclosed that. This is a systemic problem, not just a problem in this particular case. What I worry is that this may reflect a general approach that the FBI takes when they get FISA warrants, disclosing only what they want to disclose and not telling the court about information that might lead them to reach a different conclusion.
See, he's looking big picture there. And I think he's right. This could be a systemic problem. And it might not even be because of partisan politics. It could be just abuse of power, that they have just gotten used to this approach that they can get away with getting these FISA warrants so easily without disclosing all the information. And any civil libertarian, anyone who believes in a check on the government, an innocent until proven guilty, should be worried if this is happening. For whatever reason, it's happening. And I think he's right. Now, he continues on with this point, and he's a voice of reason here, and this is what he said.
We have to see the entire dossier. We have to see the entire application so we can make a judgment about whether there was an abuse. You see, I don't believe, distinguished from I think what a lot of your guests do, that this was necessarily partisan, that the FBI, sure, guys like Strzok care deeply about Trump losing and Clinton winning. I think for the most part, it's overzealous prosecution that transcends partisanship. And that's why every American, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, has a stake in making sure that the FBI remains accountable and follows the law and follows the Constitution. That's why I've suggested from the very beginning a nonpartisan commission that could stand for and represent all the American people, not the partisan bickering that grows out of committees when the Republicans release part of a report and then won't release the Democratic part of the report. We have to make sure nonpartisanship protects all of the American people.
So he makes a point that, I remember under George W. Bush when the Democrats and the left were outraged at how easily it was to get these FISA applications, and they were using mass surveillance of cell phones to try to catch terrorists. And the left and the Democrats were saying, we should all be concerned about this because this is the right. This is the president going too far, infringing the rights of the American people. And now all of a sudden those same Democrats, other than Alan Dershowitz, they don't care. They don't care that the FBI could be abusing their power and FISA could be abusing its power to get these warrants. Well, for whatever reason, even if it's not a political partisan reason, they're still abusing their power, and we all should be concerned about that. And nobody is. Well, now the Republicans are concerned and the Democrats aren't concerned, and it would switch at the next political partisan thing. And right now, our civil liberties are being taken away. I think he makes an excellent point there. Maybe we do need a nonpartisan commission, if that's even possible. I don't know if nonpartisan commissions are even possible in today's world. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffee on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom Menson, but I believe there was some kind of big game or big event on Sunday.
This past Sunday?
Yeah.
Are you referring to the Puppy Bowl?
Yeah, that's it. No, the Kiddie Bowl. The Kiddie Bowl, which is on the Hallmark Channel. No, of course, we had the Super Bowl happen on Sunday, which, I mean, everybody watched. We got to see the Eagles beat the Patriots.
And their big celebration parade is this coming Thursday.
We got to see Tom Brady lose, which always makes me happy.
It's a long, long parade, and I think somebody somewhere is making a big mistake. There's going to be free beer along the parade route.
Is there really?
Yeah.
With all the problems they've had in Philly after the parade?
That's right.
What? Ooh, all the problems they have in Philly after the Super Bowl, after they won, all the riots and everything, and they want to hand out free beer. Will they think that will do the opposite, calm everybody down? All right. That's very interesting. But there was, I obviously cheer for the Eagles because I'm just tired of hearing about the Patriots winning every year.
You and 96% of the country, yes.
But there was also a couple other things that happened after the Super Bowl that made me happier that the Eagles won. Nick Foles, the quarterback, and the coach of the Eagles, Doug Peterson, it turns out are men of deep faith, that they are just open about their faith. And they were open about it after winning the Super Bowl. They've been open about it before. They had prayer meetings before the game and a prayer with some of the team before the game. And it's just really encouraging to see that in today's world and to see them being open about it and to see them give credit to their Savior. And just an example of that, here was Doug Peterson in a press conference after the game.
How do you explain this, that 9 years ago you're coaching in high school and here you are with this trophy?
I can only give the praise to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for giving me this opportunity.
So, I mean, that was great to hear. Then Nick Foles, after the game, said something very similar. And by the way, Nick Foles says he wants to be a pastor after he retires from football, which is very interesting. But this is what he said.
Unbelievable. All glory to God.
So that was really cool. So I just wanted to say, really happy to see that. Now, Tony Dungy.
Yes.
Yeah, who is former coach of the Bucks, the Colts. Now he's a commentator on NBC, on NFL on NBC, Sunday Night Football.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He tweeted this out
mm-hmm.
in response to all this because he's an open. I mean, it's been known for a while. He's an open man of faith. He tweeted this out. He said, "Congratulations to the Eagles. Nick Foles told me last week that he felt the Lord had him in Philadelphia for a special moment, and he played like it tonight." It's a good tweet. A lot of Christians would agree with that. So that's great. Tony Dungy then tweeted this out as well. He said, after all the celebrations and confetti, Justin caught up with 3 Eagles QBs, Nick Foles, Carson Wentz, and Nate Sudfeld, along with Zach Ertz, who scored the winning TD. They were in a room by themselves praying and thanking God. It was great for him to see that. So that's really cool. And then, a bunch of controversy started, of course, because you can't be open about your faith if you're an NBC sports commentator. No, not in 2018 America. Like somebody tweeted in response, said, Tony Dungy, unbelievable you would use your employer, NBC Sports, to spout this nonsense on the air. So Tony Dungy responded, this is how you defend your faith. This is the right way to do it. I love Tony Dungy. This is what he said. NBC pays me to express my opinion, and it was my opinion that Nick Foles would play well because his Christian faith would allow him to play with confidence, and that he's a good QB. I think I was right on both counts.
Mm-hmm.
Good response by Tony Dungy.
Sure.
Some person said, I'm just not wanting it as a part of football analysis. Humans are not the Holy Spirit. Tony Dungy said this in response. He's wanting to defend his faith. He says, why would you find it hard to believe that the Holy Spirit could speak to Nick Foles just as much as a coach could speak to him? If he credited a coach for saying, stay calm and be confident, that's good. But if he tells me Christ says that to him, I shouldn't report it? And then Tony Dungy, said, basically defending his faith. So I thought that was pretty good. It's nice to see people like this stand up for their faith every once in a while. So I wanted to point that out and bring that to you guys as well. So speaking of NFL stuff, what happened in Philly after the Super Bowl, that is also a part of things that made Yaffee laughy. So we were just talking about this earlier, just a few seconds ago, what was going on in Philly after they won. I mean, they knew there would be a lot of people, but some people went a little too far. Let's just say that. But I mean, it's Philadelphia sports fans. That's usually what happens, unfortunately.
Well, the interesting thing is 10 years ago when the Phillies won the World Series, their parade drew 2 million people. They expect more to attend this parade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's going to be – I would not want to be there. I already don't like crowds enough. There's no way. And free beer would not get me there. So that was going on. Hardee's, the restaurant, they decided to put a tweet out in response to all this. They said this. It said, we are excited to serve everyone biscuits tomorrow morning at our Philadelphia location. But in order to do that, it needs to be not burned down, please. I think that's a reasonable response by Hardee's.
Yeah.
Let's not burn down.
Yes. Stay away from our place.
Yeah. Yeah, so they got a lot of great response. One person said, I love a corporation with a great sense of humor. One person said, best tweet ever. Another person said, that made my night. I have to admit, I first saw it, that made me laugh. I thought that was really good. You know, if we would love to serve biscuits in Philadelphia the next morning, but it'd be nice if you didn't burn us down so we could do that.
That's right. We don't want to serve you burnt biscuits.
So, Tom Menton, did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did. I watched the first half.
The first half, so...
And then I just kind of conked out. But...
couldn't stay up for all of it, huh?
The thing that popped into my mind was, hey, as soon as it's over, I can watch all the highlights and not put up with all the, extra stuff.
The reason I'm asking is, the game, whatever, that was a great game. But what about the commercials? It's so fun. It's funny. I was thinking about this. It's the only time where people look forward to the commercials.
That's right.
Usually commercials are hated.
Yeah.
We fast forward over commercials, but somehow the Super Bowl has created an event where you stop to watch the commercials.
Right.
You think there's got to be a way. You would think marketers would come up with a way for somewhere else where people would get excited about commercials other than other than the Super Bowl.
It was one of those nights that if you had to make a nature call, when would you do it?
That's a good. You just, I don't know, put in a catheter. I don't know. I guess that's all you could do. But was there any commercials that you liked?
I thought the New York Giants was excellent.
Everybody says that they like that one.
Yeah.
What's funny is that was an NFL promo. It wasn't even like a real commercial.
And I think some of the promotions that they did for the Olympics were very well done also.
Yeah, those were good.
Yeah.
I think the funniest one for me was Jeff Goldblum in the Jeep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, imagining being chased by the T-Rex again, like in Jurassic Park, and then eventually turning around and then chasing the T-Rex with his new Jeep. I thought that was really good. What else? There was some pretty good. I don't understand the Bud Light Dilly Dilly thing. I think that is the most overrated campaign in television.
Dilly Dilly is silly.
I mean, I get what it's supposed to be, but I'm like, we're just making up words now. Is this what we're doing?
And
I don't get it.
I don't understand all the Tide commercials either.
Those were weird.
Yeah.
Tide's in a little bit of a tough spot for other reasons, though. All right, thank you for listening to the show. If you missed any of the show, make sure to check out the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. Also, follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. And, well, we'll catch you guys next time.
Oh, well,